Welcome to this YSL tutorial. In this session we're going to teach you a little bit about how to perform calculations with dates in Microsoft SQL Server. What we'll cover in this session is first of all how to perform formats with dates using one of the built-in formatting codes. We'll then move on and show you how to create your own custom date formats, and then we'll move on to performing calculations with dates. First of all, how to calculate the difference between two dates, and finally how to calculate somebody's age in years accurately, which is a little bit more tricky than you might think. So let's get started. One of the first things you'll probably want to do with dates and times in SQL Server is to change the standard format. In this simple query I'm showing the film's release date, and the data type of that column is a date time. All date times come out in this standard format, which is year-month-day, and includes a time component even if you've not stored any time data in that date. So the standard way to format your dates into a slightly more readable format is to use the convert function. There are three arguments to the convert function. The first is the target type, the data type you want to get. That's always going to be some kind of text in this case. The expression, which is the second argument, is what we're trying to format. And then finally, the date style, which is a simple code number. I'll come back to those in a moment. So I want to generate the standard UK date format, which is 2 digits for the day, a /, 2 digits for the month, another /, and 2 digits for the year. So that's 8 digits in total, which means I'm going to try to generate chart 8. The comma then, and then the name of the field that you're trying to format, which is film release date, and finally the code, which I know just from experience is the number 3. I'll come back and show you how you can get more of those in a moment. If I execute this query now, I get the standard UK date format, day/month/year. If you want to see the long list of all of the available date format codes, the easiest thing to do is click onto the word convert once it's been typed in, and then press the F1 key on your keyboard. That should display the standard SQL Server help page. And here I actually need to click in a little bit further. There's an extra link to see more information about the convert function. If I click onto that one, I'm now in a fairly long page about how the cast and convert functions work. If I scroll down a little, I'll get to a nice big table showing me a list of all of the date time codes with and without centuries. I'll come back to that once again in a moment. And then what date that is designed to show you. So I suspect most of my viewers are going to be in the US, so you're going to be using the code number 1, of course, which is month/day/year. Okay, let's get back to the query. I'm going to close down the help window. A common thing to do if I wanted to display the 4-digit year, so the year with a century, I need to include 2 extra characters in my output data type. Then the easiest thing to do is just add 100 to the date time code you used originally. If I execute that query again, I now get my dates and times with a 4-digit year. So that's how you use one of the standard built-in date format codes to format your dates. Sometimes you'll want to create a date and time format that isn't part of the standard list of date format codes. So rather than using the convert function, instead you can use the date name function and build up your date format out of its component parts. So to begin with, what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a format that reads the full day of the month. So for instance, Jurassic Park will come out as Friday, 16 July 1993. So the first part of that is to calculate the day of the week. To start with, I'm going to use the date name function and open up a set of round brackets, and there are essentially 2 arguments that we're going to use. The first is called interval, and that's basically the unit of time that you're trying to calculate. And then the date is the second argument, so that's what you're trying to calculate the value from. At this point I'm not entirely sure what the intervals I can use are, so I'm going to revert back to using the help system again. If I quickly hit help and how do I, if I type in, as you can see I've already done there, if I type in date name in the search box at the top left hand corner and hit enter, it will take me directly to the date name help page, and there should be a table here which shows me all of the individual units of time that I'm allowed to look for. So the one that I'm looking for to calculate the name of the day of the week is either weekday, or a slightly shorter, neater way to do it is the code DW. If I close down the help page and return to my code, if I type in DW, in fact they appear in a list here for me in the IntelliSense list in this version of SQL Server. I type in a comma then and say film release date. And if I execute that query now, it will show me which day of the week my films were released on. All I need to do now is build up the rest of the formats using concatenation. If I add on a space first of all, and then add on, if I go down to the next line here and say date name again, I know that the next bit of information I want is the day of the month, and the code for that is DD, and film release date. And if I execute that query, Friday 16, and so on. I can carry on building up this date format using day name, and in fact at this stage it's probably easier just to copy and paste. I know that the full month name is MM. There it is. Oops. There we go. And finally, one last one. Day name YY. I get rid of the extra space at the end, and finally execute that query. There we go, a full custom formatted date. Now if you're lucky enough to be using SQL Server 2012, or later I suppose, you might be aware of a function called format, which makes formatting dates much easier. But if you're not using SQL Server 2012 or later, then this is the standard way to build custom date formats. A common calculation that you'll perform with dates in SQL Server is to work out how much time has passed between one date and another. So for instance, you might be calculating somebody's age, or their length of service, or the length of time a product has been on display on a supermarket shelf, for instance. All these differences between two dates can be calculated using the date diff function. So if I show you briefly how we could calculate the difference in days between a film's release date and today's date, I can say date diff, open brackets, and the intervals of time are the same as for date name, so DD and DW, etc. I want the difference in days between the film's release date and today's date. Now there's another function in SQL Server which calculates today's date when it's called getDate. It doesn't have any arguments, but it still requires the parentheses. And if I execute this query now, what it's going to show me is how old each film is in days. Nice and straightforward. I can also change the units of time there to display and show the difference in years. In fact, it's just quicker and easier to copy and paste this. If I change the days to years, I can execute this query now, and it shows me the age in years. Now if you look at this, the actual results here, this is telling me that Jurassic Park is 19 years old. If I can just quickly squeeze in the getDate function into a separate column, you'll find that this isn't actually 100% accurate. Jurassic Park was released on the 16th of July in 1993, and today's date is the 21st of June 2012. So at this point, Jurassic Park is actually only 18 years old. It isn't going to become 19 years old until the 16th of July in this year. This is one big thing to watch out for when you're using date diff. When you ask for the difference in years, that is literally all you get. Effectively, the calculation that's been performed is 2012 minus 1993, and the difference between those two numbers is 19. If we want to calculate the age in years accurately, we need to create a slightly more complicated function. Now, the technique for calculating the age in years accurately in SQL Server is a bit complicated, but let me see if I can lead you through it. What it involves doing is first of all calculating the birthday of my person or my film this year. And to do that, I'm going to use the dateAdd function. Now, as the name suggests, the dateAdd function allows you to add a number of years or months or days or whatever to a given starting date. So you can see that hopefully there are three arguments or parameters. The first one is the interval of time, so this is going to be years again. The second argument is how many of those intervals do I want to add. I want to add the same number that my dateDiff function has already calculated for me. So I'm going to copy and paste that into the dateAdd function. The last argument is which date would I like to add that number of years to. So if I execute this query at this point, basically what I'm seeing here is the birthday of Jurassic Park in the year 2012. Now that I've got that piece of information, what I can do is wrap a case statement around it to check whether or not my birthday has passed this year. So if you're not familiar with case statements, let me build it up from scratch. If I start by adding case and end, head back up, add in a when clause. The when clause lets me test whether some kind of condition is true. So I want to test if the birthday of my film this year, I'm going to copy that, is greater than, I'm going to have to come down to the next line here, today's date. So there's a condition. If the birthday of my film this year is after today's date, if it has not yet passed. If that's true, then I can calculate the age of my film in years by using dateDiff, film release date, just in the same way I already have. But I know that its birthday has not happened yet this year, so I can simply subtract 1 from the result of dateDiff. Finally, I can write an else clause and say, well, if the birthday of the film has already passed, so the birthday is not later than today's date, then I know that the film is the age that dateDiff tells me it is. You might need to re-watch that a couple of times to get the logic correct, but hopefully when I execute this query, what I'll see is that I get the absolute exact age of each film in years based on whether or not its birthday has passed this year. And you can use that technique to calculate the age in years for anything in SQL Server. If you've enjoyed this training video, you can find many more online training resources at www.wiseowl.co.uk.